Hello everyone, this is Skadoosh and welcome to an Uber Endgame overview video for the Corrupting Cry Warbringer with a special tier 4 Arbiter kill at the end. If this is your first time seeing the build, please check out my full build overview video or Steel Mage's explanation video with better audio, linked in the description. Let's start with the skill gems that I changed for the Uber Endgame variant. Most of the things are still the same as the Endgame variant. Cast a block, same as before. Mace Strike, just use to hold Splinter, so we can swap that out for boss fights instead of Devastate. Seismic Cry has all the same gems. Level 20 now for me. Infernal Cry, same things. It's just the Warrior Totem has the same things. One thing I do note is that I tried out Heft for a bit because it doesn't have the reduced or less attack speed that Heavy Swing has. But I ended up swapping it out because Heavy Swing is a still more damage boost than Heft. But if you feel like you want that extra attack speed, you can of course use Heft instead of that. Shield Charge is still the same. I have Culling Strike in here, but it does nothing. It's kind of pointless. Blasphemy is the same. Overwhelming Presence has 3 sockets now, just so I can hold all the boosting spirit gems, support gems, so that I can then have that for both sets, and I don't need to swap it out when I swap out Attrition. Speaking of Attrition, we're using that instead of Scavenge Plating for boss fights. Scavenge Plating doesn't really do anything for pinnacle bosses, so we use Attrition instead, and we have extra spirit spare for Attrition, so that's why we're using that. Lightning Warp and Ball Lightning is one of the bigger changes we made. I tried out several other things over here, as you can see, which I'll go over later, but Lightning Warp and Ball Lightning works like this. Put out the Bite of Wall Lightning, and then Lightning Warp to it, and it will teleport you and put down Shocked Ground. This is the important part. Normally, when you shock enemies, you have to do lightning damage, and the bigger the lightning hit, the higher the chance to shock. With Shock Ground, it automatically applies shock. That's a baseline 20% more damage multiplier to any hits you deal, or to any damage, which means both Corrupting Cry, Corrupted Blood damage, and our totem damage. But with the help of Overcharge, 75% increased magnitude, and 10% increased magnitude from the quality on Lightning Warp, we get up to 37% more damage with the shock. So I do this once, shock is on the boss, they take 37% more damage. It's kind of crazy good. You can also use Accelerate on Ball Lightning as well as Arcane Tempo to be able to cast it a bit faster. Accelerate means the ball goes pretty far when you cast it. You can also use Decelerate if you want, which means it'll go much slower and it's much easier to do it on close targets. Personal preference, I feel like Accelerate means you can do a bit more with it, and you can like close gaps or jump some corridors and stuff, similar to what Leap Slam did before. For Attrition, it's a really nice damage boost, and I felt like it was much more useful compared to War Banner, because even though it takes 60 spirit instead of War Banner's 30 spirit, we had that spirit anyway, so we might as well just use it, right? And that's with no extra spirit on our scepter. All you need to do is use an Arcanist Etcher on the scepter to get 20% quality, which means you'll get up to 120 spirit here, and you'll then have enough to use Attrition. As well as you gotta make sure to quality the Blasphemy. You have to have the 10% reduced reservation, and once you have that, we'll have enough. We'll have 4 extra spirit to spare to use Attrition. Attrition is a massive damage boost, up to 53% compared to just 30% from War Banner. Obviously, you have to wait a pretty long time before it gets to that number, but nonetheless, at least for Arbiter, it's really nice damage boost. Speaking of other things we can use, I was trying out Hammer of the Gods as a possible single target damage option, but I noticed that because we scale so much duration for our totems, via things such as protraction. It meant that the time it took for Hammer of Gods to actually land on the ground after casting it, the boss had already moved. So I'd have to use a gem such as Fast Forward, which means one less gem to increase the damage. You also need weapons with the physical damage, which is quite costly. You can't just have +7 to level of all melee skills like we can for our totems. You need that and a high physical damage physical damage roll on your weapon, on both of your weapons. So that's a big cost there. And I didn't really feel like it had much of an impact, so I cut that out. I was also trying Shockwave Totem with Overabundance, because that means we can actually have 4 totems out instead of 3. And we have a couple nodes on the tree, such as this one over here, Ancestral Unity, which gives an extra 4% attack speed per summon totem. But the totem itself costs even more mana than Ancestral Warrior Totem. So that's over nearly 1.2k life when it converted with blood magic. And that's a lot of life. And it kind of made it too difficult to use properly, and even the damage wasn't that satisfactory. I also have Leap Slam, which was an option before, which we use in the endgame version, because Consecrated Ground is really significant due to the 5% maximum life per second. This is actually really good, and it's probably even double our life regen. But because it takes a skill slot, and you also have to use the Leap Slam, it's quite slow and leaves you vulnerable because you're in set 2 without your shield. And of course, we want the extra damage with our Ball Lightning Warp setup. Something else you can use for Pinnacle bosses is a level 11 Seismic Cry, which is the lowest level possible for Seismic Cry. And with that, we can actually use that on bosses to reduce the normal cost on a Seismic Cry, which is 72 life for me at the moment, down to 49 life. And if obviously we put down Inspiration, 30 life. And put some more supports. We don't need Swift Affliction because our Corrupted Blood damage isn't really that significant anymore for bosses. So we can just use it as a utility to regen more life. And that puts it at 42 Seismic Cry cost. And with that, when we spam our Ancestral Warrior Totems, we lose a lot of life. But then we can just spam a War Cry and it recovers pretty quickly. So in boss fights, you want to put down 1 totem, recover, spam your War Cries, 1 totem, recover, spam your War Cries, and so forth. And with this, we can reliably recover our life between totems for Pinnacle boss fights without pretty much losing anything. Because a level 20 Seismic Cry only increases the base damage of the War Cry itself, which is really not significant, and we only use it for maps because it allows us to stun mobs more easy. But we don't care about Seismic Cry stunning mobs for Pinnacle bosses, because our totems are going to do that for us anyway. So that's why we can keep it low level to use it as a way to regen life. That's the skill gems. So I made some passive changes for the Uber Endgame variant. First off is that I've now added this impact area and impact force wheel to the set 2 for totems. The reason I do this is because of Earth Shatter. When we have Earth Shatter, and especially with the Upheaval gem, it means that it puts down 3 fissures when we cast it. These 3 fissures have an AoE when they explode from one of our War Cries. So I want to show this here. I manually cast it. See how I have 3 fissures down, and then War Cry, and they have explosions. On a boss, especially when they're a bit further away, it's not guaranteed that each explosion is going to hit the boss. Which means even though it's technically 3 times the damage if they all hit, it can be less than that if they don't. So if the boss is not in the middle or a bit further away, we can't get full damage. And that's pretty bad because Upheaval is only good if all 3 explosions hit the boss. So to make sure that it does, we have a bit more AoE on the tree. Next thing is the Shattering Blow wheel here. The reason I have this is because Seismic Cry is not enough to fully break the armor on a boss, even with Splinter, before the boss is pretty much dead. So to make sure that we bypass that, we use this, because our totems basically insta-stun the boss, and when they do, it removes 75% of the current armor. It says 50% here, but that 50% scales with these two nodes. Break 10% increased armor, and break 40% increased armor, so 50% total. 50% of 50% is 25%, so you add that on top, 75%. And then that last 25% we can break with Splinter on our Seismic Cry. Hard to Kill is another node I picked up because it gives a significant amount of life regen, as well as some recovery from our life flasks if we're pretty low. And usually if we spam all 3 Ancestral Warrior totems, like so, we're going to be on low life or close to it, and then we get a big boost from our life flask. Ideally we don't do this, and we just use our War Cries and pass the regen, and then put down one at a time. But this will help in case that we do need to put down all 3. So this is nearly 1% life regen, which is very significant. Iron Reflexes is another thing we pick up. The reason I picked this up is mainly due to one of our chest pieces, which I'll go over, which we changed. And this one gives specifically armor and evasion rating. So it's usually less armor than what a good armor-only chest piece would give. But because it has both, we can then take Iron Reflexes instead, and it will convert this evasion rating to armor. And since we're scaling armor via nodes such as Sturdy Metal, we'll get a big boost to our armor, even though we're running a hybrid chest piece such as this. So that's why we have Iron Reflexes, and also it also means getting evasion on our rings is a big boost to armor if we can get that because of this belt, which I'll also go over. I don't have that yet because it's very expensive to get rings with evasion and all the other stats, but yes, Iron Reflexes is a good pickup for us. A unique jewel that can go into our build, another one that isn't the Against the Darkness, is this one over here that I've added called From Nothing. This gives you a random keystone and allows you to locate passives in radius of that keystone. So for example, if I had one for Zealous Oath, I will be able to get stuff in this area, for example. But we want the Unwavering Stance one, which is this one over here. With this, we can pick up Finality, which is a massive damage boost if the enemy is low life, and it also gets the increased strength from our Against the Darkness jewel. This is what makes it so nice. As well as we get Vengeance, just for the strength. We don't care about Thorns, there's nothing, it's just the strength and it's in the radius, and we have extra points. Escalation, which is a really nice node, because increased Warcry speed means more Warcries per second, which means more damage, and health as well. The increased damage for each different Warcry recently, if you used recently, is for both Seismic Cry and Infernal Cry. So that's a 40% increased damage boost if you use those two. Recently means the last 4 seconds, so you just gotta make sure you use both of those within the last 4 seconds. Should be quite easy. Another thing we have is Bulwark. Bulwark's probably considered quite a bad keystone, and you would never really pass to it. But since it's just 1 point for us because of our Wavering Stance circle, it's actually quite nice. Dodge roll effectively gives you 100% chance to avoid projectiles and attacks, right? But since we have block and Svalin, it doesn't make that much of an impact because we block basically 90% of hits anyway, right? So what we can do with our dodge roll instead is to make sure that if we do get hit by something, we take 30% less damage. So dodge roll is basically like an extra layer of defense rather being just a chance to block. Because if we do get hit, we'd rather have this. Because dodge roll does not work on AoE attacks normally anyway. But with Bulwark, it does. So that's very helpful. Another jewel that we can pick up is Megalomaniac. This is a complex jewel in how to slot into your character. And depending on which ones you get, it will have a completely different impact on what you need to choose on your passive tree and such. But what it does, it gives you completely random passive notables on your tree. So it can give you anything on the entire tree. I've made a search link for a lot of the good ones that we can get in the guide, but you can add more as you see fit, because I will 100% have missed out some of them if you want to widen your search. The ones I have in mind is cranial impact. So that's this one over here, which is just a simple one. It saves me 2 points. So 2 points to pick it up, and it gives me strength. That's basically, and some stun buildup. But it's just the strength that I care about, and it just saves me 2 points, which I can use other places. And then I also have Tides of Change, which is this one over here, and it gives us 25% increased skill effect duration, which helps my totems last longer, which is quite nice. So I don't have to spend as much life, and we can stay in set 1 longer. There's definitely better ones than this. I got this for very cheap. Probably they're going to be a bit more expensive now that I posted that link. But there's tons of options. Feel free to experiment and try different things. Yeah, it might be difficult to fit into your build, but make sure that if you do get something that has points or you have allocated, like any of these here or this one over here, that you unspec it and then pick up something else. Last jewel, which is not unique, is that I've now added a special search link for the jewels, which uses weighting. So each stat on here has its own weighting based on how useful I think it is. Kind of still work in progress, and I've made block chance mandatory because we kind of need that on every single jewel. And you also still need to make sure that you have the bleed chance, at least 10%, I think, bleed chance. Other than that, there's some other stats such as increased damage against enemies full armor broken. This is the best increased damage you can get on a jewel, especially for boss fights, because it is the highest. Nothing goes as high as this. Increased life regen is a really nice stat that we kind of need, and it boosts everything such as hard to kill, the flat life we get normally, as well as ancestral mending when we have a totem down, and it makes sure that we can regen back to full after casting totems much more consistently. I'm unsure if it works on recover 2% of life. It might, but I'm unsure. It's kind of hard to test that, but it's still a very good noticeable change having this in your build. Another stat that I like is skill effect duration. Here, increase skill effect duration, because this increases the duration of our totems, which means we can stay in set 1 longer, and we don't have to spend our life as much to have them down. Very nice and comfortable stat. Now to go over the item changes. First things first, the offhand weapons used for totem summoning both still have +7 to level all melee skills, but more importantly, we have increased stun buildup, and increased stun buildup. So this expert oak great hammer is the only one with an implicit, which is like a base to the item, which has increased stun buildup, and then you can get a suffix, just an item. So these are the 2 stats we want: level of all melee skills and cause increased stun buildup. And then we also have 2 sockets, stone runes, which are the only runes that seem to do anything for a build, and which also gives stun buildup. This gives a total of, with passives on tree and stuff, 307% stun buildup, which is very significant for insta-stunning bosses and allowing us to have high uptime on DPS, as the boss will just stand still. So it's really good. Surprisingly, the offhand does not actually need this. I have it just because, but if I unequip this, it will actually not go up. Still 307%. So the offhand, from my understanding, does not do anything. So the only stat that's important there is the level of melee skills. You don't need to care about stun buildup. Main hand, I have this Brimstone Weaver Shrine Scepter. Doesn't matter that it has the Purity of Ice buff. Any scepter works. Even minion ones, if you want that, they can actually, if you have enough int, you can socket stuff into them, and they can maybe cull for you or something like that. But I think just having minions is annoying, so I'm not sure I recommend it. But Strength, intelligence, reduced accurate requirements. Same as before, just higher values. You don't need any spirit. I have 0 extra spirit on mine. So no prefixes that give me increased spirit. I just have the quality with 20%. And it's exactly enough to get attrition into the build. So with attrition, this attrition is a 60 spirit gem. Instead of scavenge plating, I have 4 spirit to spare. So if you want to run blink, then you're going to need more spirit. So you're going to have spirit as well on the prefix. But if you want to run blink, you also have to unsocket something. That's up to you if you want to run blink. Helmet, I have a corrupted Black Sun Crest with some pretty high values here. 50% increased strength, 50% increased dex, 12% intelligence, which is not ideal, but it's the best I could get. I got this a long time ago and never really replaced it. But it also has 2 sockets, which allows me to get 10% elemental resistance via the soul core of Sitaqualotl. And having 2 of those is nice, because getting max res is difficult when you have a lot of unique items. Shield, same as before, Svalin. This one also has 2 sockets, but I just have extra resistance in there to fill out my resistances. If you have enough resistance other places, you can get a corrupted version of Svalin that can go all the way down to 7% to maximum block chance. Even though it's a negative number, that's obviously the best outcome, because it means we get an extra 3% here, maximum block chance. So this number can go up to 68%. And that's the best. If you can fit and get more resistances other places, then I recommend getting a minus 7% to maximum block chance here. That has to be corrupted though. Amulet. For amulets, you actually want more attributes. +3 to level up melee skills. This gives boosts our totems, so they do even more damage. Increased armor is whatever. Same with accuracy, and you can have maximum life. Getting all 6 stats to be good. So ideally, instead of accuracy rating, we have % maximum life, and instead of increased armor, increased armor is probably fine actually. So increased armor, % maximum life, and maximum life as high as possible. And also on a better amulet, currently I have a lunar amulet, which gives me maximum energy shield. On the implicit, I don't need this. It does nothing for me, so it's completely useless. But getting every single stat on one amulet is extremely expensive. So the 3 stats you most care about are the ones at the bottom probably, and maximum life. So maximum life, level melee skills, and then as much strength and attributes as you can get. You do need the all attributes though, so you can fit in attrition, as well as using your shrine, your scepter. So for rings, ideally you want chaos resistance, some sort of elemental resistance, ideally all elemental resistance, strength, and max life. And if you can get a bonus, you can get evasion on there, because evasion, due to the new keystone we picked up, Iron Reflexes, gets converted to armor. So it's actually armor for us. So that's really good. I have similar one here. Here I have chaos resistance, strength, all elemental resistances, but no life, unfortunately. Because these rings can get really expensive the more stats you want to them. And of course, this combines with ingenuity. That's the reason why we're using breach rings, because we have 50% on attribute modifiers. So our 30 strength on this one goes up to 45 strength, and our 31 strength goes up to 46. And then that's boosted by an extra 74% multiplier. So it gives us a lot of strength from equipping these rings. So if I take both rings off, we go from below 800 to over 1000. So it's a massive increase in strength if you can get rings like this combined with an ingenuity. Our chest piece is a Warrior Invictus with the stats increased attributes per socket rune or soul core, as well as increased maximum life per socket rune or soul core. I also just use resistances, so all elemental resistance for a total of 25 all elemental resistance to cap that out. This gives a massive boost to stats, and especially dexterity and intelligence as well, because it's all stats, which allows us to use stuff like attrition and ball lightning. Gloves. We also want this level of all melee skills stat. Strength, of course, as much as we can get. And maximum life. Everything else is bonus. If you can get some more armor, evasion of rating also works, of course, because that's converted to armor. And then any resistances that you might need as well. Boots, as much move speed as possible. We love move speed. I believe this can actually go up to 35% at tier 6. And then as much life as you can get. Strength. If you need chaos resistance, of course, you gotta max that out, as well as any other resistance as well. Life flask. I've increased amount recovered, but this is actually incorrect. I should have a flask that has the stat removes 15% of mana and increased amount recovered. Because we have no mana, it's really 0 mana, it means the mana it removes doesn't do anything. So it's just extra life that our life flask can give back, so it's better to have that. I like the thawing charm. It's kind of the most annoying ailment that can be applied to us, allowing us not to move. Because we have a lot of max life, we kind of reduce the chance of getting frozen and stunned and all this. But freeze specifically is especially the most annoying, so that's why I would have as your charm slot. Alright, that covers all the changes in the Uber Endgame version. I'll have a tier 4 Arbiter kill now at the end of the video if you want to watch that. It was much smoother than my 3-3 Arbiter because I actually used lightning ball and ball lightning properly, as well as breaking the armor of the boss quite quickly. And I appreciate everyone for watching. This will probably be it for the Corrupting Cry build come 0.2 at least. If 0.2 has changes, of course I will probably at least add that into the build guide. Whether or not I make a video is we'll see. But anyway, thank you very much and bye bye.
The fourth edict already burns for your world.
Ancestors!
Grave turmoil awaits you. Insignificance. This is the legacy of humanity. Acquiesce, mortal. You the mother soul was
Fortune favors me.